They say when a man dies, his sins go with him. But in our town, that wasn't true, because the man we buried last Sunday, he left 17 behind, 17 sins, sealed beneath the floorboards of Redemption First Baptist. I wasn't supposed to come back here. I'd made peace with never seeing this place again. 10 years is long enough to forget the way home, or at least pretend to. But then the phone rang. A woman's voice, one I barely remembered, told me Pastor Ezekiel had passed. Heart attack. Right in the pulpit. Collapsed mid-sermon, like God had flipped a switch. She said they were clearing out the church. Asked if I could come help. Said the pastor would have wanted it. And maybe she was right. Because even after everything, I couldn't say no. Redemption. First Baptist sat at the edge of town, quiet as ever, like it had been holding its breath since the day I left. Same white wood, now cracked and sun-bleached. Same rusted bell tower no one dared fix. Same crooked wooden sign, half covered in ivy, still reading, "Come as you are." Inside smelled like memory, like dust and communion wine, like sweat-soaked hymnals and 1,000 whispered prayers that never made it past the roof. The air was heavy, not warm, not cold, just thick. Like the walls themselves remembered what happened here. Everyone else was busy sorting Ezekiel's office, clearing out papers, sermon tapes, old photos. I stayed behind in the chapel, not because I wanted to, but because something kept me there. I sat in the front pew, same one I used to sit in as a kid, same one Mom used to cry in when Ezekiel would talk about forgiveness like it was a product on sale. The stained glass glowed above me, sunlight bending into color, painting the pews in soft, broken light. It looked holy, but it didn't feel holy. It felt haunted. Then I heard it, just a creak, soft, sharp, right beneath my feet. I froze. It was the same board we used to joke about. We called it the Devil's Plank. Back in youth group, we'd dare each other to knock on it 3 times and run like hell before the devil pulled us under. Back then, it was just a story. Now, it didn't feel like one. I knelt down, put my palm flat on the wood. It was colder than the rest. I knocked once. The sound echoed, hollow, deeper than it should have been. Then I felt it, a breeze, a faint draft through the crack, from below, and just like that, a memory punched its way back into my skull. I was 16. It was late. I had come back to grab my coat, and I heard something, crying. Ezekiel was in the sanctuary, alone, kneeling on the floor, right where I was now. He held something in his hands, wrapped in cloth, rocking, whispering, "Some things God don't forgive. Some things God don't forgive." I left before he saw me. I never told anyone. Until now, I never told myself. I looked down at the warped board under me. Something was under there. Something Ezekiel hid. Not in a drawer. Not in his will. Under the house of God. I stood up, heart pounding, one step back, then two, and for a split second, the sunlight from the stained glass turned the board beneath my feet a deep blood red. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about grief, or closure, or honoring a man who led 1,000 prayers. This was about something buried, something left behind, and whatever it wasn't done speaking. It's strange how a man can spend his whole life telling people how to live right, while burying the worst parts of himself beneath their feet. Stranger still, how we all believed him. Hell, I needed to. Pastor Ezekiel wasn't just our preacher. He was the man. He baptized half the town, spoke at every wedding, buried every veteran. When my dad left, Ezekiel was the one who told me I'd still turn out okay. He'd pat my shoulder and say, "Boys like you, God's just not done writing yet." I clung to that like scripture, because when you're 15 and your world's fallen apart, you'll believe almost anything that sounds like love. But now, standing in that church with a hollow floor and a breeze that shouldn't exist, I started to wonder, how many of us did he lie to, just to hold himself together? I didn't sleep that night. I went back to my hotel room, poured myself 3 fingers of whatever cheap bourbon they had at the gas station, and sat staring at the ceiling fan like it might spell out a confession. And somewhere around 2 a.m., I drove back, alone, no lights, no one knew. I brought a crowbar and a flashlight. The board came up easy, too easy, like it wanted out. Beneath it, there was a crawl space, tight, dark, cold, and in the center, an old wooden box, no lock, just a leather strap and a note taped to the top. "If you found this, then you were meant to." My hands were shaking. Inside were letters, 17 of them, each one numbered, each one in Ezekiel's handwriting. I opened the first. "This is Secret One. I was 23. Her name was Marlene. I loved her more than I loved God, and I let her drown because I couldn't choose." I stared at the page, read it 3 more times, set it down, walked outside, and vomited into the bushes. You ever have a moment where your whole past starts peeling like old wallpaper? Where everything you thought was sturdy turns to dust in your hands? Because that's what that letter did to me. And here's the part I haven't told you. When I was 17, my brother went missing. No warning, no goodbye, just vanished. Ezekiel held me while I cried, told me God would bring him back, told me to have faith. I did. I held on to that faith like it was all I had left. Until now. I opened the second letter, then the third. One was about forged documents. One about hush money paid to a grieving father. One about a baby that never made it past the back pew, and a mother who disappeared after service. It was like reading confessions from a ghost, each one chipping away at the man I thought I knew. And I know what some of you are thinking. Why didn't you stop? Why not just walk away? But let me ask you something honest. If the man who shaped your soul turned out to be built on lies, wouldn't you want to know every single one? By the time I reached the 8th letter, I was on the church floor, knees aching, mouth dry, heart thudding like a war drum. That's when I heard the door creak open. I froze. Flashlight off. Dead quiet. Someone stepped into the sanctuary. Slow, heavy boots. They walked to the pulpit, stood there a moment, then walked out. Didn't say a word, didn't look my way, just left. I waited 15 minutes before breathing again. My hand was still gripping the 8th letter, like it might explode. And when I finally opened it, that's when the wind left my body, because it was about me. It said, Secret 8. I knew what happened to his brother. I watched him walk out that door. I told myself I couldn't stop him, but the truth is, I didn't try. I dropped the page, stared into the crawl space, and for the first time in a decade, I felt something break loose inside me. Grief, rage, betrayal, regret, all of it, all at once, like a dam cracked open. You ever look at someone you loved and realized they were never who you thought they were? That maybe the person you trusted most was just better at hiding their sins than you were? Because that's where I was, kneeling on the church floor, holding the truth like a loaded gun. And trust me, what came next was worse. You ever find out something so heavy, you feel it crack a rib inside you? Like your body knows the weight of the truth before your brain even catches up? Because after I read Secret 8, I couldn't breathe. It didn't say how my brother disappeared, didn't give an address, a reason, a body, just that Ezekiel saw him go, watched him leave, let it happen, and said nothing for over 10 years. I sat there, on the cold wood floor, box of letters beside me, sweat in my palms, dust in my throat, and this thought came crashing in, the kind you never say out loud. What if everyone I ever trusted was in on the same lie? I opened the next envelope, letter 9. His mother came to me crying, said she couldn't do it anymore, said the bruises didn't just happen on the outside. I told her to pray. I told her to go back. I dropped it. God help me. I dropped it like it burned me, because I knew who that letter was about. Her name was Callie. She sang in the youth choir, soft voice, shaky hands. Her mom used to come into the church kitchen to help fold bulletins. One Sunday, they were just gone. Pastor said they moved. Family emergency. We believed him. But now I knew. He sent her back to the man who broke her ribs and threatened to kill her if she ever told. You ever feel like the ground you're sitting on isn't just wood, it's bones? Because that floor, that church, it was built on top of people's pain. I kept going, letter after letter, 17 in total, secrets like sins, folded and filed away in the shadows. A missing girl whose search was quietly called off, an overdose buried as a heart attack, a teenage boy sent to pray the gay away, who never came back, and through it all, Ezekiel's voice, aching with regret, dripping with guilt, but always justifying. God forgives what man cannot. I was only trying to protect the church. I didn't know what else to do. That's the part that killed me. Not just the secrets, but the justifications. Because it wasn't like Ezekiel was evil. He wasn't a monster. He was complicated, human, broken, just like the rest of us. And somehow, that made it worse, because monsters are easy to hate. But what do you do when the man who saved you also damned someone else? Tell me, would you forgive him? Would you? I sat in the dark sanctuary for what felt like hours. The only light came from the stained glass. Reds, blues, gold, color leaking onto the floor like quiet blood. My hand trembled as I reached for the final letter, 17. No envelope this time, just a folded page, old, fragile, stained with something that might have been wine, or blood, or tears. Secret 17. It was never supposed to go this far. But once you bury one lie, you have to keep digging deeper. And eventually, you lose track of where you buried yourself. The last thing I buried was the truth about the boy in the photo. If you're reading this, you already know who he was. Boy in the photo? That's when I saw it. Beneath the last letter, a photograph, faded, torn. A boy, maybe 16, wiry, buzz cut, eyes too tired for someone that young. And standing next to him, hand on his shoulder, Ezekiel, smiling. And just like that, my stomach turned to stone. The boy, he looked like my brother, but it wasn't. It was me. Same jawline, same scar on the eyebrow from falling off my bike. Same dark look I used to wear when I thought no one noticed me. But I didn't remember this picture. I didn't remember that day. Didn't remember Ezekiel ever touching me like that. I stared at it, hard, because something about it felt wrong. Then I flipped it over. In Ezekiel's handwriting, 2006, before the incident. What incident? What the hell was he talking about? And then it hit me, like a freight train. I didn't remember whole chunks of that year, not just moments, weeks, months, whole seasons blurred into each other. I thought I'd just blocked it out. Stress, grief, growing up. But what if I hadn't forgotten? What if I'd been made to forget? What if this was the real secret? My breath got shallow, hands ice cold. I stared at that photo like it held a different kind of death. Because suddenly, I wasn't just the reader of this story. I was in it, and maybe I'd always been. Tell me I'm not the only one. Tell me you've looked at a part of your past and realized you don't recognize yourself, that something doesn't fit, doesn't line up, like the pieces are there, but someone rearranged the puzzle while you were sleeping. Because right then, I wasn't sure what scared me more, that Ezekiel had lied to everyone, or that he had told the truth about me, and I'd just never known. That's when the door creaked open again. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Someone else was here, and before I could speak, before I could even move, a voice from the dark whispered, "You shouldn't have opened the box." I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you've ever felt like something was off, like there was something right in front of you that didn't make sense, but you just kept going anyway, this one's for you. Because sometimes it's not the things we know that haunt us. It's the ones we almost remembered. Maybe you've had a moment like that. You're standing in a room. Everything looks normal, but your chest tightens, your gut turns, and deep down, something screams, "You don't belong here." And by the time you realize what's wrong, it's already too late. "You shouldn't have opened the box." That voice. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like it didn't belong in this world. Low, calm, too calm, like someone reciting a bedtime story they've told too many times. I turned, flashlight trembling in my grip, but there was nothing, just pews, shadows, silence. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer, only the sound of my own breath growing quicker. Then, a slow tap on the wooden wall beside me. 1, 2, 3. Just like we used to do when we joked about the devil's plank. Except this time, no one was laughing. I stood up, too fast, my head spinning, sweat crawling down my back. The letters were still spread on the floor. The photograph, the final confession. I grabbed them in a panic, stuffed them in my jacket. Then I heard it again, a creak, but not a floorboard, the back door of the sanctuary. It had just opened. My legs moved before my brain did. Down the side aisle, out the front doors, into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I hit the sidewalk. And even then, I felt like something was chasing me. Not a person, a truth. I got into my car, locked the doors, hands shaking as I tried to jam the keys in. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, just one text. "Meet me at the basement. You need to see the rest." I should have ignored it, should have thrown the phone out the window. But you know how stories go. You don't stop mid-sentence. You finish the chapter, even if it kills you. I drove back, not to the church, but to the building next door, the old Sunday school that hadn't been used in years. The basement had always been locked. Ezekiel said it was for storage. But I remember now. He kept the key under the stone frog by the rosebush. I opened the door, steps leading down, pitch black, and that smell, damp wood, rust, mildew, old breath, like something had been waiting. I took one step, then another. Each creak felt louder than the last. The flashlight flickered. Of course it did. At the bottom of the stairs, a single bulb dangled from the ceiling. I pulled the chain. It buzzed to life. Weak, yellow light casting long, sick shadows on the walls. And there, in the corner, was a chair, and someone sitting in it. I stepped closer. It was a man, thin, pale, hair matted, eyes wide, distant, not blinking. I whispered, "Do I know you?" He didn't speak, just slowly turned his head and smiled. It took me a second, but then it hit me like a tidal wave. It was my brother. Older, broken, but unmistakably him. I stumbled backward, hand covering my mouth. "Jason?" He blinked twice, then nodded once. That's when I saw the chain around his ankle. I dropped to my knees, grabbing at the cuff. "Who did this to you? What the hell is going on?" He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came, only a slow shake of his head, like he didn't have the words, or they'd been taken from him. I looked up and saw something written on the wall behind him, painted in red, dripping. "Some secrets don't stay buried. Some grow roots." Then a sound behind me. Footsteps, fast, confident. I turned and saw him, the man who had texted me. He stepped into the light. I didn't recognize him. Mid-40s, graying hair, glasses, holding a folder in one hand. He looked at me like I was a puzzle piece he'd been waiting to find. "You're not supposed to be here yet," he said. I stood. What the hell is this? Why is my brother chained? Because he came back. His voice didn't waver. We tried to help him, but he kept remembering. Remembering what? The man opened the folder, pulled out a photograph, slid it toward me. It was me, in the church, as a teenager, on the floor, unconscious. Ezekiel kneeling beside me, holding something. "What is this?" "That," he said, "is the moment you died." I blinked. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You flatlined, just for a minute, but when you came back," he paused, "you weren't the same. Neither was Ezekiel." I took a step back. My brother made a small sound, like a whimper or warning. "He knew," the man continued, "knew that if you remembered what happened that night, it would unravel everything." "What happened? Why do you think he left you the letters?" he said. "Guilt doesn't stay buried, not forever." He took another step forward. I saw, "You ever feel like your whole life was just one long sermon, waiting for its last line? I used to think closure was something someone else gave you. A letter, a confession, an apology. But sometimes it's just silence, a silence that doesn't hurt anymore." The morning after we ran, I woke up in a cheap motel with sunlight bleeding through the blinds. My brother was still asleep, curled up like a kid, breathing steady, safe. I sat there and just watched him for a minute, longer than I should have, because for the first time in 15 years, he looked like he could finally rest. We didn't talk much that day. Some silences don't need to be filled, but I asked him, gently, if he remembered what happened. He nodded, just once, didn't speak, didn't need to. I saw it in his eyes, the knowing, the shame, the kind of wound words only make worse. So I didn't ask again. We stayed off-grid for a few days. Burner phone, cash. I kept thinking someone was following us, but no one came. No texts, no voices, just wind, and grief. Eventually, I drove us back to the church, not inside, just the lot across the street. We watched it from the car. New pastor now, smiles more, talks about grace like it's still worth something. Funny thing is, the pews are more full now than they've ever been. A week later, I mailed the letters to 3 people, a lawyer, a reporter, and a mother who never got closure. No name, no return address, just the truth. That's all people want sometimes. Not justice, not revenge, just the truth, so they can stop replaying the lie. It wasn't a grand reckoning. No helicopters, no arrests, no news vans outside the church. But stories started leaking. Old members began whispering. Someone called for an investigation. The man from the basement? Gone. No trace. Like smoke after the fire. But Jason was with me, still quiet, still healing. But this time, he stayed. We moved out west, not far, just far enough. Small town, bigger sky, cleaner air. He paints now, mostly abstract stuff. But sometimes, I see the outlines of things I remember. A stained glass window, a locked door, a crawl space. I started writing again, not letters, stories. Stories like this, because someone once told me that truth buried doesn't die. It just waits to be spoken by someone brave enough to remember. And maybe that's who I became. Not a hero, not a survivor, just someone brave enough to finally remember out loud. You know, when I was a kid, Ezekiel used to say, "The Lord works in layers." I never knew what that meant until now, because life is layered. Love is layered. Even the lies we live through stack on top of each other until we forget where the bottom was. But the truth, the real truth, it only needs to be said once to cut through it all. I went back one last time to the church, alone. I didn't go inside, just stood at the edge of the lot and watched. And for some reason, I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired and calm. I looked at that building, its bricks, its steeple, its memory, and I whispered, "You don't own me anymore." Because sometimes winning isn't about breaking chains. It's about not needing to wear them just to feel whole. If you've ever carried something too heavy for too long, and finally put it down, then you know what this part feels like. You know the quiet victory, the soft, earned breath of a story that almost broke you, but didn't. So if you're still listening, thank you. You stayed. And that means you probably needed this as much as I did. Be honest. Who else needed this? Leave a comment if you made it through. Leave a heart if it helped. Subscribe if you felt it. And if you're still carrying something, just know you're not alone in the pew. We all bury things, some out of guilt, some out of love, some because we were told to. But maybe the bravest thing you'll ever do is come back to the place you left yourself and finally say, "I'm still here." We didn't get everything back, but we found something better, ourselves.